Trading hour, 40 points, 41 points on the Nifty. We've got about 10,949. So basically when we started at 11, there was about 20 points on the index and it's added 20 more. Not at the day's high, but not very far now as well. At one point it was looking like it's selling off and maybe we get into the flat terrain, but not anymore. There is a noticeable pickup that we've seen. Devang Mehta, Head of Equity Advisory at Centrum Wealth Management, is now joining in to take some questions on the market. Devang, thank you for your time. Good to have you here. First up, if you can just tell us a couple of reasons why we are seeing such strong activity. You know, we had somebody yesterday and day before yesterday who said, well, you know, December is usually a positive month and it usually, and it's not just true here in India, but around the world as well. That quite does not cut it as a reason. What do you think is going on?
Yes, thanks Prashant for having me on the show. I think clearly, Prashant, there are two things which come out of this scenario from the learnings of this last quarter, say October, November, December. It's clearly a market of fluctuating fortunes, which we have seen in the last 3 months. And why I say this, because is at all the key macros at that time, like crude or your rupee or a rupee depreciation, if I can say, or bond yields, everything was playing a spoil sport at that time. And the same factors now have turned on their head. And I think what we are seeing across in November as well as December is that everything has changed, and all this are becoming now the catalysts or the enablers of this market rally. Another thing is that market generally hates uncertainty. So with state elections out of the way, with RBI governor in place in the 48 hours after a resignation, I think market has sort of also cheered this type of things where there is some bit of certainty and there are no key positive or negative events for the next 3-4 months, at least in the local market, except for earnings, which has started to show a bit of green tick. So my sense is all these factors, along with industrial production rising up, inflation trending down, talks about interest rate now not going at least on the upside, is sort of exciting the markets on the way up.
Devang, hi, morning. Do you think for a stock such as Tata Motors, which has lost almost 60% of its market cap this year, its fortunes could probably change in 2019?
Ekta, I think it's very difficult to analyze a stock like Tata Motors, and why I say that, because it depends on a lot of key variables. The Indian business hardly contributes anything to the top line. It's a meager part of the overall business, but the majority of the revenues would come in from China or Europe and US, which is extremely difficult to analyze. And my sense is it's a very complex business in that sense. So automobiles in India would definitely do well. There is of course a slowdown across the motor line that we have seen in the last 3 months, but my sense is the pent-up demand would come up in the coming quarters, and being an election year, I think a good demand will be seen in the next 2 quarters. So my sense is be with the Indian businesses, not recommending, but stocks like Maruti, stocks like M&M, which are dependent on the local consumption, would start doing very well.
So local businesses, consumer facing or infrastructure businesses? You know, this big broad shift, I think people are forced to pick and choose at the end of every year and the start of a new year. Is it consumer, is it infra? It doesn't have to be either or, it could be a mix of both. But where do you stand broadly? I mean, I think it's also getting asked because for a couple of years we've not had any strong investment demand, right? So infrastructure stocks relative to financials, etc., maybe have underperformed.
Yeah. So, Prashant, what we have seen in the last quarterly numbers, and in fact the last 2-3 quarter numbers, I was just dissecting, and what we saw is there was a visible uptick in the capital goods companies' order book, as well as the execution picked up. Margins of a lot of companies started to improve, and government capex, which had started to show a bit of color, that's also sort of bearing good, I can say, stead in the market. And where we see companies like L&T, companies like Siemens, companies like Honeywell Automation, all doing very well after coming from a big hiatus. So this is one side of the economy. Of course, as you rightly say, it was not sort of rolling, and that has also started to show a bit of uptick. And if private capex comes in, and we know that it sounds very cliche when we talk about it at the start of the year that the private capex would come in, but it comes very late. So my sense is government capex already has started to roll the ball, and that is showing in the capex capital good numbers. So it's a mix of consumption, because the conspiracy theory is also that the election, it's been an election year, there will be a lot of spending which will come from the government side as well, which will spur consumption. So my sense is, yes, a mix of consumption, financials, and capex-oriented companies, or capital good companies rather, would sort of serve the purpose.
Okay. All right, Devang, we're going to leave it on that note. Thanks very much for joining in and speaking with us. So that's the view coming in from Centrum on the markets. We need to take a break now with the news that 10,950 is almost here for the markets. And that would be close to the high point of today.